I'm Kendra, 28 years old, and I'm staring at the chipped paint on the walls of my shoebox apartment, wondering how I became the family doormat. I should be further along than this. A real life, not just scraping by. But hey, that's family, right? Except in my family, no matter how high I climb, my little sister, Brittany, always shines brighter. For 3 soul-crushing years, I secretly funneled $5,000 a month to my parents, basically living on ramen, and the hope that someday, somehow, they'd actually see me. Then Dad opened his big mouth at Thanksgiving, and the whole charade blew up in my face. But before I tell you how I finally went nuclear on my family drop, a comment below letting me know where you're tuning in from. And hey, if this hits home, smash that like button and subscribe for more family drama. That'll make your head spin. It all started back in our 2-story colonial in suburban Atlanta, Georgia. My father, Richard, a sales executive for a large logistics company, was all about the hustle. But lately, it felt more like a grind. My mother, Sharon, juggled her real estate career with trying to maintain the image of the perfect Southern homemaker. Even though money was tight, they always seemed to find a way to shower Brittany with attention and opportunities. Brittany. She was effortless. That's the only word for it. Naturally beautiful with long, honey blonde hair and eyes so vividly green, they looked like polished emeralds. She moved through life with a grace that made my own clumsy attempts at popularity feel like a bad sitcom. Everyone fell in love with her. Teachers, coaches, even the cashier at the grocery store. And my parents. She was their North Star. I, on the other hand, was reliable. While Brittany flitted between cheerleading practice and weekend parties, I was the one making sure the bills were paid on time back when I was in high school and working part-time. Of course, keeping the fridge stocked and reminding everyone about appointments. If Brittany forgot her lines for the school play, I stayed up all night helping her rehearse. If she lost her phone, which happened a lot, I was the one retracing her steps and finding it. I was the responsible older sister, the one who picked up the pieces, and it was glaring to see how different my parents favored her as we got older. The back-to-school shopping trips were a classic example. Brittany got a brand new wardrobe, name-brand jeans, the latest sneakers, and enough glittery accessories to open her own boutique. I got hand-me-downs and a be grateful for what you have lecture. When Brittany decided she wanted to be a competitive cheerleader, my parents shelled out thousands for private coaching travel expenses and those ridiculously sparkly uniforms. They beamed with pride at every competition, recording endless videos and posting them on social media. When I expressed interest in joining the debate team, which by the way cost a grand total of $50 for the entire year, I was told we couldn't afford extras right now. But the piano lesson debacle. That was the knockout punch. We were maybe 10 and 7. Brittany and I had both asked for piano lessons at the exact same time. We'd been saving up some of our allowance money and passionately presented to them why we should be able to take lessons. Instead of deciding how we were going to get lessons, my mom and dad sat us down for what I thought would be a discussion about trading off or finding a way for both of us to learn somehow. Instead, they lectured us how piano lessons were expensive and they could only afford to send one of us. Then Dad gave Sienna the go-ahead by saying, "Brittany, you have this amazing natural talent for music. We can hear it when you're singing in the shower." Continuing, Kendra is more practical-minded, so this opportunity is best suited for your sister. I felt my chest sink into my stomach, but I forced myself to smile and congratulate Brittany on her gift. This became my pattern throughout my whole childhood. Swallow up all the disappointment, be the bigger person in the room, and hope that someday my sacrifice would be noticed and appreciated. As we progressed through high school, the favor became more pronounced. Brittany was the homecoming queen star of the debate club, and also a social butterfly, never meeting a person she couldn't immediately charm. While Sienna was in plays, our parents never missed any event. They sometimes drove 3 hours just to see her perform in competitions. Meanwhile, I was exceeding everyone's academic expectations. I held a 4.5 GPA while working after school at a local grocery store. I saved money to attend college. When I was inducted into the National Honor Society, my parents missed the ceremony because it conflicted with one of Sienna's dress rehearsals. When I won a $1,000 scholarship for academic excellence, the celebratory dinner was delayed because Sienna had a hot date that night and needed the car. I kept telling myself that Brittany just needed more attention and guidance. My independence was a gift in disguise. This was making me stronger and more self-reliant as a person. I kept holding on to an ache, wondering if I was ever going to earn the same respect and love as my parents provided Sienna so naturally. When college applications arrived, it revealed how vast the disparity was. I applied to all in-state universities while doing thorough research into scholarship opportunities. In the meantime, I prepared to take out student loans to finally pursue my education. Sienna, on the other hand, had her heart set on a private art college. When she got accepted, my parents were overjoyed and immediately began paying for her tuition, room, and board. There was never a discussion about loans or even financial responsibilities. Everyone just knew that Sienna's dream was worth any and all sacrifices. When I brought up my own college plans, I was told that my parents were proud of my independence and they knew I would figure it out. There was a clear message in that statement that Sienna's education was an investment in the family and my own responsibility to manage. I was hurting, but hopeful things would change as we both became adults. I was a firm believer that my hard work would be recognized eventually. When I proved to them that I could stand on my own 2 feet in the real world, my parents would see my value and treat me with the same amount of admiration as Sienna. I graduated with a degree in marketing and a mountain of student loan debt. I landed a position in downtown Atlanta as an entry-level position with a reputation for being reliable, creative, and someone who would work longer hours than anyone else. My first apartment was small and nothing fancy. It was barely 400 square feet on the east side of town. There was a kitchen and a small Murphy bed that could be folded up during the day. The rent was roughly $1,000 a month, which was exactly what I could afford after making my student loans, paying for groceries and general expenses. I furnished my place with thrift store finds and garage sales. I learned how to cook simple meals and found free entertainment around the city. Meanwhile, Sienna moved back to our childhood bedroom after graduating from an expensive art college with a fine arts degree. She'd been talking about her passion for sculpting and painting as she figured out what her next steps would be. Our parents were completely supportive of this plan. They encouraged her to take the time to explore what she wanted to be artistically. Our monthly family dinners became a showcase for Sienna's creative journey. She would bring all her latest paintings to dinner, and my parents would spend the entire evening discussing color theories, artistic inspiration, and the difficulties of being a sensitive artist in a world that's constantly trying to sell you something. They hung her art all over the house, proudly displaying them to all of the visitors and talking about Sienna's God-given talent. When the topic switched to me, it only lasted for a few minutes. Marketing was considered practical but not interesting or impressive. My promotions and achievements were addressed with brief congratulations, and then the attention shifted back to Sienna's artistic endeavors. My second year in the firm, I was promoted to senior analyst with a sizable salary increase. I was ecstatic to tell my family the news in hopes that maybe I would finally earn some of the recognition I have always sought after. I had prepared all the stories about my successful campaigns and positive feedback I've gotten from my clients. When I told my mom about my promotion, she smiled and said, "That's so wonderful, Kendra. You've always been so great with practical things." She quickly turned to Sienna and asked about her latest art project. That night, as I was driving home to my small apartment, I felt disappointed and resignation. I learned to not expect too much when it comes to my successes, but it still stung when my achievements were treated as common, while Sienna's were extraordinary. It was about this time that I started noticing financial stress around my parents' household. Dad's sales were becoming more sporadic as he got older, and his back pain got worse. My mom's real estate income was not enough to cover all the daily expenses, especially with Sienna still living at home. One month, I overheard my dad on the phone asking the electric company for an extension on their payment. Mom started clipping more coupons and buying generic brands of everything. I could see the worry on their faces, but they were trying to hide it from Sienna and me. Without telling them, I started sending them $500 to help with their expenses. I set up an automatic transfer from my checking account to theirs around the 15th of every month where I know all the bills are coming due. I told myself it was only temporary until Dad could make enough to take care of all the bills. The first few months, my parents called to thank me but seemed confused where the money was coming from. I kept the transactions anonymous and didn't want to make a big deal about it. When they asked if I knew anything about these mysterious deposits, I told them maybe Sienna was just surprising them. To my surprise, they were quick to accept this explanation and started praising Sienna for her maturity and generosity. They boasted how mature and caring Sienna was becoming, and how she was thinking about their needs while pursuing her artistic dreams. I felt weird and sad hearing them praising Sienna for something I did. Part of me was happy that they were getting the support they needed. The other part of me felt invisible while contributing significantly to their well-being while getting little to no recognition. Around this time, I started dating Mike, a software engineer who I met at a coffee shop near my work. He was intelligent, caring, and interested in my opinions. For the first time in my life, someone valued what I had to say. He quickly noticed my family dynamics. He pulled me aside after a couple of family dinners and questioned why my parents seemed more engaged with Sienna than with me. He had observed that the conversations flowed better when Sienna was speaking, but not so much when I was speaking. I found myself trying to make excuses for them, saying Sienna was just more outgoing and entertaining, and my parents were proud of me. James listened carefully, but I could see the concern in his eyes. He began pointing out to me when my contributions were dismissed and overlooked. He helped me recognize the patterns that I would ignore. My breaking point happened during my 25th birthday. I had brought up the date several times leading up to it in hopes that maybe this year would be different. I even took the day off work hoping that my family might want to celebrate. The morning came and went with no texts or calls. I tried not to feel hurt and told myself that everyone was just busy. Later in the afternoon, Sienna called, excited to tell me about her 22nd birthday party that our parents were throwing for her. She spent a good 20 minutes describing the decorations, cake, and guest list. She was so excited that she didn't even realize that she was calling me on my birthday. When I mentioned that today was my birthday, there was a pause, and she said, "Oh, wow, I totally forgot," and continued, "Happy birthday." The party planning had been all over her mind. She didn't offer to include me in the plans or even mention to my parents to wish me a happy birthday. The oversight was devastating. That evening, Mike took me to a quiet dinner and listened as I admitted how invisible I felt in my own family. Despite all of this pain, I still kept sending money to my parents and slowly increased the amount as my salary grew. I had convinced myself that my financial contributions were worth more than the recognition, that it was more important to help them financially than receiving the emotional validation. The turning point came when my dad suffered a serious accident at work one winter. He was carrying heavy materials up a ladder when his foot slipped and he fell and landed on his back. He needed months of physical therapy to recover and an extended leave from work. The medical bills began accumulating almost immediately, and I can see the panic in my parents' faces when we all had our family dinners. They were trying to hide their financial stress, but it was so obvious. Mom began tutoring even more students on nights and weekends, trying to bring extra money to the family. Dad grew more frustrated that he wasn't physically able to help. Sienna was unaware of the severity of their situation. She still lived at home, didn't pay rent, and bought art supplies with the money that she borrowed from Mom. When my dad would grimace from pain, Sienna would hug him and return to discussing her art. Without any thought, I increased my monthly contributions to $2,000. This meant that I would have to make sacrifices in my own life. It was painful to see my parents struggle. I canceled my gym membership and started buying generic groceries from the store. Mike saw that this was affecting me and started expressing his concerns. Mike said that I was working myself to death, that I was working long hours and never wanted to go anywhere because of the cost. I tried to explain to him that it was just a tight period of time and things would improve soon. I couldn't bring myself to tell him about the money I was sending to my family. I was afraid that he would try to talk me out of helping them. Sienna's lifestyle wasn't showing any financial constraints that I had. She was getting manicures every week, buying expensive groceries, and going out with friends on the regular. She was dating someone new and was always wearing stylish clothes that probably cost more than what I would spend on groceries in a month. During family dinners, conversations always revolved around Sienna's growth and support for the family. They said how blessed they were to have a daughter that understood their needs without having to ask. My mom said how she was so intuitive to our needs, that she just took care of everything. These conversations were getting difficult for me to handle. I would sit at the table eating the food that my money probably helped purchase and listening to my parents praising Sienna for something I did. Sienna would smile modestly and change the subject. She would never correct their assumptions, but she wouldn't acknowledge the truth either. I reached my breaking point and couldn't handle it. I was working 60 hours a week at my job plus freelancing on the weekends. I moved to a smaller studio apartment with a shared bathroom down the hall and no air conditioning. I was eating mostly rice beans and vegetables. I was wearing shoes with holes in the soles because I couldn't afford a new pair. My social isolation was getting worse because I couldn't participate in activities that were expensive. My relationship with Mike was suffering because I was tired and stressed. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was sacrificing everything for my family while Sienna got all the credit. I was only existing to support others. Still, I continued to make the payments every month. I had convinced myself that my dad would recover and my parents would figure out who was helping them. My hidden generosity would be revealed and would make all the suffering worth it. It happened one warm summer day during Sienna's 25th birthday party. My parents had decided to throw Sienna a big barbecue and had invited all the members of our extended family. I dreaded this party because I didn't have the money to give Sienna a gift. After all the monthly rent expenses and payments to my parents, I only had $60 left in my checking account until I get paid next. I thought about skipping the party, but I knew that was only going to cause more drama. I decided to give Sienna a picture frame I had found for $12 with the remaining $48 in cash. I left a heartfelt note explaining that she should display her artwork and use the cash for art supplies. I knew it wasn't much, but I could afford it. The party was in full swing as I arrived. Sienna looked beautiful in a new sundress, with her hair styled perfectly. As usual, I felt like an outsider. The conversations felt like they were happening around me, not including me. When my relatives would ask about my life, they would drift away before I could even answer. I started helping my mom in the kitchen, getting the food out and cleaning up the messes. The opening of gifts was happening later in the afternoon. Mom decorated a special table with art-themed wrapping paper and ribbons. Sienna's presents were huge and elegant. Dad announced it was time for her to open the presents and everyone formed a circle. Sienna started opening presents and everyone was thrilled. She received expensive art supplies, jewelry, and gift cards. My present was at the bottom of the pile in paper from Christmas. As Sienna went to pick it up, my cheeks began to burn. It looked so small compared to everything else. She opened it and thanked me. Then Dad picked up the card and started reading it. He started to look disappointed and his voice started to cry as he exclaimed, "You only sent 60 cents." He said it like I had just found loose change in between my couch cushions. The whole party went silent. All eyes turned to me. I felt the shame as Dad continued to add, "Sienna sends $5,000 every month," he declared, as if my modest gift was a personal insult to the family. "Your sister has been supporting us, and you can't even get a decent present." In that moment, my breaking point arrived. 3 years of sacrifice. I said quietly that it was me sending the money. Dad looked confused and slightly annoyed that I was interrupting. He asked, "What are you talking about?" I repeated. "The $5,000 a month I've been supporting the family." My mom stepped forward and said, "Stop stealing Sienna's credit. We know where that money comes from, and it isn't you." I pulled out my phone and said, "I can show you my bank records." Dad said, "We don't need to see fake records. We know which one of our daughters takes care of this family." I looked around and saw their faces. They thought I was a selfish daughter, jealous of my sister. Everyone there believed the events that had occurred. I had enough. I said nothing and walked to my car and drove away. As I drove away, I could hear Dad's voice resume and start making jokes about dramatic sisters. I had finally made the choice that was going to change everything. I signed into my bank account and canceled the transfers to my parents. I kept the money for myself. That night, alone in my cramped apartment, microwaving a sad excuse for dinner, I finally faced reality. They weren't going to see, not unless I forced them to. I logged onto my bank account and axed the automatic transfer, the one that had been bleeding $5,000 a month out of my life and into theirs. If they genuinely believed Brittany was their financial savior, then they were about to get a very rude awakening. For the first time in 3 years, my entire paycheck landed in my account, mine to spend, mine to save. The relief was immediate and almost intoxicating. I didn't have to agonize over which bills to pay, whether I could afford that desperately needed new tire for my beat-up Civic, or if I could even think about buying a decent cut of meat instead of the mystery ground chuck on sale. For the first time since Dad's accident, my needs came first. The decision felt liberating and terrifying. I was standing up for myself, demanding recognition, but I was also playing financial Russian roulette with my family. As I drifted off to sleep, the weight of the consequences pressing down on me, I wondered if I just detonated my entire world. The first 2 weeks were eerie. Silence. Complete and utter silence. I figured they were still simmering about my attention-seeking outburst at Brittany's party, giving me the cold shoulder. Fine by me. I was riding a wave of financial freedom I hadn't felt in years. With an extra $5,000 sloshing around, I could finally ditch the ramen and beans diet for actual food. I splurged on a decent haircut, replaced the threadbare jeans I'd been patching for months, and even treated myself to a latte. Every day. I even went on a real date with Mike, no more splitting entrees or hitting up free museum nights. We went to that trendy bistro he'd been talking about, the one with the rooftop terrace. And I didn't wince when the bill came. I could finally relax and enjoy myself, and it felt incredible. Then the phone started ringing, non-stop. Tuesday night, 6:30 p.m., Mom, then Dad, then Brittany, then Mom, again me. I stared at the flashing screen, adrenaline surging through me. They knew. It was starting. I let it go to voicemail, bracing myself for the storm. Mom's first message was clipped, her voice tight with forced control. "Kendra, honey, call me back. Something's off. We need to talk." Dad's was less subtle. The controlled anger barely contained. "Call your mother, now. Something's screwed up with the bank account." By the time I got to Brittany's, the panic was palpable. Her voice was trembling near tears. "Kendra, Mom and Dad are freaking out. They called me saying the money didn't come through this month. I don't know what's going on. Call them, please." The next morning, Dad called. His voice was a shaky cocktail of confusion, embarrassment, and the beginnings of dawning realization. "Kendra," he said, the gruff sales executive, replaced by something almost childlike. We need to talk. The bank says those monthly transfers were coming from your account. Brittany says she never sent us any money. What the hell is going on?" A wave of satisfaction washed over me, 3 years of invisible sacrifice, finally crashing against the shore. For a split second, I considered making him sweat, making him beg for the truth, pay for years of overlooking me. But the exhaustion, the weight of the secret was too much to bear. I just wanted it out. "I've been sending you $5,000 every month for 3 years, Dad." I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Ever since your accident." The silence on the other end was deafening, a black hole of unspoken questions and mounting guilt. I could practically hear the gears grinding in his head as the pieces started to fall into place. Finally, he stammered, But you never said anything. We just assumed. Brittany." I finished for him, the word dripping with bitter irony. "You assumed it was Brittany, and I let you believe it because, I don't know, maybe I thought it would be a nice surprise eventually. But I never imagined you would refuse to believe me when I finally told you the truth." The conversation that followed was a masterclass in awkwardness and denial. Dad tried to backtrack, stammering about misunderstandings and jumping to conclusions, but his excuses rang hollow. He tiptoed around the real issue, the gaping chasm of favoritism that had dictated our family dynamics for as long as I could remember. He asked repeatedly why I hadn't said something sooner, as if the years of showering Brittany with praise and opportunities hadn't sent a crystal-clear message. Your contributions, Kendra, simply don't matter as much. When I pointed out that I'd stopped the payments because of his public humiliation at Brittany's birthday party, his tone shifted, the remorse replaced by a familiar defensiveness. He accused me of being manipulative, of using money as a weapon, of trying to control the family. "We can't afford to lose that kind of support right now, Kendra." He snapped the sales executive back in full force. "Your mother is working herself to the bone with extra tutoring, and I'm still not back to full-time work. We need you to restart those payments, now." The sheer entitlement in his voice was breathtaking. Even after discovering that I'd been secretly living on the financial equivalent of scraps while silently propping up their lifestyle, his primary concern was the money. My sacrifices, my struggles were irrelevant. There was no acknowledgement of my years of self-denial, no genuine appreciation, no apology for years of misdirected credit. It was all about the cash. "I'm not restarting the payments unless things change, Dad," I said, the quiet strength in my voice surprising even myself. "I want a public acknowledgement of what I've done. I want equal treatment going forward. And Brittany needs to step up and start contributing to the household instead of living like a freaking trust fund kid." His response was immediate and volcanic. "You can't blackmail your own family with money, Kendra. That's disgusting. If you really cared about us, you wouldn't use our financial struggles as leverage to get attention." The accusation stung, but it also clarified everything. My family didn't see my financial support as a gift. They saw it as an obligation, a duty owed. And my desire for recognition, not a reasonable request, but attention-seeking behavior that diminished the value of my generosity. In their eyes, I was the villain. Over the following weeks, the pressure campaign intensified. Mom sobbed over the phone painting apocalyptic visions of foreclosure and destitution if I didn't cave. Brittany sent lengthy, emotionally manipulative texts about unconditional family love and how money shouldn't keep score. But the real kicker was the extended family. Apparently, my parents had gone on a full-blown guilt-tripping tour, enlisting aunts, uncles, and even distant cousins to convince me to be reasonable. I got a barrage of phone calls, each delivering a carefully crafted variation of the same message: family comes first. Money shouldn't come between loved ones. You're being selfish. No one seemed particularly interested in hearing my side of the story. When I tried to explain the years of being overlooked, dismissed, and having my efforts erased, they brushed it aside, claiming my concerns were trivial compared to my parents' immediate crisis. The worst call came from Grandma Millie, Mom's mother, the one person who had always been in my corner. She was 83, sharp as a tack, and her words carried the weight of a lifetime of love and respect. She called me, her voice trembling with a mixture of sorrow and disappointment. "Kendra, honey," she said, her voice thick with tears, "I'm ashamed of how you're treating your parents. I raised you better than this. Family takes care of family, no matter what. How can you watch them struggle when you have the power to help?" I tried to explain, to make her understand the years of silent sacrifice, the crushing weight of invisibility, but she cut me off. "I don't want to hear excuses, Kendra. I want to see you acting like the good girl I know you can be." That conversation, it broke something inside me. If Grandma Millie couldn't see my point, couldn't understand why I needed something, anything, in return for years of emptying my bank account, then maybe I was being unreasonable. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe family loyalty really did mean giving until it hurt without expecting anything in return. But then I remembered the heat crawling up my neck at Brittany's birthday party, the humiliation of being publicly shamed for something I'd been secretly struggling to prevent for years. I remembered eating ramen for weeks so my family could maintain their country club lifestyle. I remembered watching Brittany bask in the glow of praise that rightfully belonged to me. Mike was my lifeline during this agonizing period. He listened patiently, offering unwavering support and reminding me that my demands were not only reasonable, but essential for my own well-being. He pointed out that I wasn't asking for money or gifts in return for my support. I was simply asking to be seen, acknowledged, and treated with basic human dignity. "You're not withholding money to be cruel, Kendra," he'd say, wrapping his arms around me as I battled another wave of guilt. "You're asking for the bare minimum of recognition for 3 years of incredible sacrifice. If they can't give you that, then they don't deserve your continued support." As the weeks stretched into months and my family's financial situation spiraled, I stood firm. I watched from a distance as they scrambled to adjust their spending habits, search for new income streams, and face the harsh reality of living without the safety net they'd taken for granted. It was agonizing to witness their struggles, but it was also necessary. For the first time in my adult life, I was prioritizing my own emotional needs over their comfort. I was demanding to be treated with the same respect they showed Brittany automatically. And despite the guilt trips, the manipulation, and the relentless family pressure, I refused to back down. 3 months after I cut off the payments, my family's finances had deteriorated to a genuinely alarming level. Dad's on-again, off-again construction gigs weren't enough to cover their basic expenses, let alone the country club dues and designer handbags they'd become accustomed to. Mom was tutoring every spare hour, but even her earnings couldn't fill the growing financial black hole. The most dramatic change, however, was in Brittany's circumstances. For the first time in her privileged life, she was forced to confront the cold, hard reality of having to earn a living. The gallery internship she'd been half-heartedly considering for months suddenly became a lifeline. She scrambled to update her resume, dusted off her portfolio, and actually put in the effort to land a job. After a series of humiliating interviews, she finally snagged an entry-level position at a local graphic design firm, pulling in a measly, by her standards, $35,000 a year. Having to wake up early, ditch the yoga pants for business casual, and actually report to a supervisor was a rude awakening for someone who'd spent her entire adult life coasting on charm and family connections. She complained incessantly about the soul-crushing boredom of office life, the stifling creativity of commercial design, and the sheer exhaustion of having to maintain a regular schedule. But the real shocker came when Mom and Dad calmly informed her that she was now required to contribute $800 a month to the household budget. The look on her face was priceless. For the first time, she understood the weight of supporting a family and the sacrifices required to maintain the lifestyle she'd always taken for granted. During this period, my parents made several feeble attempts to negotiate a truce, proposing watered-down compromises that fell far short of my demands. Dad called, suggesting that I could resume the payments discreetly without any public acknowledgement. "The important thing is helping the family, Kendra," he argued, "not stroking your ego." Mom proposed that I could send smaller amounts, maybe $2,000 a month. "It would be easier for you to manage," she said, "but still make a big difference to us." Each time I calmly reiterated my original conditions, a public acknowledgement of my 3 years of financial support, equal treatment and respect going forward, and Brittany's continued financial contribution to the household. I emphasized that these weren't punitive demands, but necessary changes to ensure a healthy, equitable family dynamic. The final breakthrough came during a particularly brutal week when Dad's back pain flared up, forcing him to miss several crucial sales meetings. Without my financial cushion, the lost income sent the household into full-blown crisis mode. The mortgage payment was looming, the utility companies were threatening disconnection, and they had no savings to fall back on. That Wednesday evening, my phone rang. It was Mom, but this time her voice was different. The usual defensiveness replaced by a fragile, almost pleading tone. "Kendra," she said, her voice barely whisper, "we need to talk. Really talk. Not just argue about money or make demands. Can you come over for dinner this Sunday? Please?" Something in her tone, the genuine vulnerability in her voice, told me this conversation would be different. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding, then agreed to visit. but I made one thing crystal clear. I'm not changing my conditions, Mom, regardless of how desperate things are. Understand? Sunday dinner was stilted, unnaturally polite. Everyone was walking on eggshells, carefully measuring their words, avoiding eye contact. Brittany looked drawn and exhausted from her new work routine, her usual sparkle dimmed by the weight of responsibility. I could see the lines of stress etched deeper into my parents' faces, the cost of their financial recklessness now visible for all to see. The house itself reflected their strained circumstances. Minor repairs were being put off, and the usual displays of luxury, the expensive flower arrangements, the name-brand snacks, were noticeably absent. After we'd finished eating, Dad cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the awkward silence. He looked directly at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and something that might have been respect. "Kendra," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "we owe you an apology, a big one. We were wrong about the money. We were wrong about how we treated you at Brittany's party, and we've been wrong about how we've treated you for most of your life." Mom nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We've always been proud of you, Kendra," she added, her voice trembling, "but we took your strength, your independence for granted. We assumed you didn't need as much attention or support as Brittany, but that wasn't fair. You deserved just as much recognition, just as much celebration." The acknowledgement felt surreal after years of being relegated to the background. I'd fantasized about this moment countless times, rehearsing the perfect response, crafting the most cutting comeback. But now that it was finally happening, all I felt was numb, a strange mix of vindication relief and a deep, aching sadness that it had taken such extreme measures to reach this point. Then Brittany spoke, and her words stunned me more than my parents' apology. "I knew the money wasn't coming from me," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should have said something when Mom and Dad started giving me credit for it, but I liked feeling important. I liked feeling appreciated. I was selfish and cowardly, and I'm so sorry." That confession was perhaps the most meaningful moment of the entire evening. For years, I'd wondered if Brittany was actively participating in the deception or simply passively allowing it to continue. Learning that she had known the truth all along was painful, a confirmation of the depth of her self-absorption. But her honest admission, the genuine remorse in her eyes, was the first step toward rebuilding the fragile thread of trust between us. Dad then addressed my specific conditions, his voice filled with a sincerity I'd never heard before. "We accept all of your terms, Kendra," he said, looking me directly in the eye. "We want to make this right. Not just because we need the financial help, but because we love you and we want you to feel valued, truly valued in this family." The public acknowledgement came at the next family gathering, a 4th of July barbecue. Much smaller than Brittany's disastrous birthday bash, thankfully. It just included the core group of relatives who had witnessed my public humiliation. Dad stood up before we carved the watermelon and cleared his throat, instantly silencing the chatter around the picnic table. "I need to make an announcement and an apology," he began, his voice unusually somber. Heads turned, forks paused midair. 3 months ago, I publicly embarrassed Kendra. I criticized her birthday gift to Brittany, and for that, I am sorry and ashamed. What I didn't know then was that Kendra had been secretly supporting our family with $5,000 every month for 3 years. A collective gasp rippled through the backyard. He continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I was wrong to credit Brittany for Kendra's generosity, and I was wrong to treat Kendra with disrespect. She has shown us the true meaning of family, and we are forever indebted to her." The reactions from the relatives were predictably mixed. Aunt Carol, always the gossip queen, looked genuinely shocked, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning understanding. Uncle Frank, ever the pragmatist, just cleared his throat and shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting to change the subject. My cousins, bless their hearts, offered shy, apologetic smiles. But the important thing was this: the truth had been spoken, publicly, officially. My years of sacrifice were no longer a secret, a source of shame, or a footnote in someone else's story. They were acknowledged, validated, and finally appreciated. But the shift in day-to-day family dynamics was what really mattered. It was immediate, noticeable, and frankly, surreal. Suddenly, my opinions mattered. My suggestions were taken seriously. My accomplishments were celebrated with the same enthusiasm that had always been reserved for Brittany. When I casually mentioned getting a promotion at work, a real honest-to-goodness promotion with a corner office and a significant raise, both Mom and Dad grilled me about the details, asking probing questions about my responsibilities and expressing genuine pride in my success. It was strange and wonderful. Brittany's transformation, however, was the most remarkable change of all. Working full-time, struggling with a demanding boss, and facing the daily grind of office life had instilled in her a newfound maturity and a profound sense of empathy. She finally understood the value of $1, the weight of responsibility, and the true meaning of sacrifice. She began seeking my advice on everything from career decisions to financial planning to even relationship issues. Turns out the effortlessly charming Brittany wasn't quite as confident when it came to navigating the messy world of dating. "I had no idea how much you were handling all by yourself," she confessed one evening during one of our new, surprisingly frequent sister-to-sister heart-to-hearts. "I always thought you just had everything figured out so easily, but now I understand how much work, how much sacrifice was involved." Our parents also continued to prove their commitment to treating us equally, making conscious efforts to celebrate my milestones, listen to my concerns, and include me in family decisions. It wasn't just symbolic either. It was practical. It was consistent. When I mentioned wanting to take a well-deserved vacation with Mike, a real vacation, not a budget camping trip, they encouraged me to go, urging me to prioritize my own happiness rather than feeling obligated to send extra money their way. My relationship with Mike also blossomed. The constant stress, the agonizing guilt, the web of secrets that had been poisoning our connection simply vanished, replaced by open communication, mutual trust, and shared goals. He'd stood by me, a rock in the storm, as I navigated the treacherous waters of family drama. Watching me finally stand up for myself, assert my boundaries, and reclaim my self-worth had only deepened his respect and affection. 6 months after resuming financial support, Dad's health had improved. His back pain had subsided, and he was back to full-time sales. Combined with Brittany's steady paycheck and Mom's tutoring income, they finally achieved a level of financial stability that didn't rely on my constant infusions of cash. When I announced that I would be gradually reducing my monthly contributions, their response was everything I had hoped for during those long, lonely years of invisible sacrifice. They expressed sincere gratitude, acknowledged the personal cost of my generosity, and wholeheartedly supported my decision to prioritize my own future. "You've given us so much more than money, Kendra," Mom said, her voice thick with emotion during our heart-to-heart about transitioning away from my support. "You've taught us about appreciation, about respect, about recognizing the people who love us enough to sacrifice for our well-being." But the most profound change was within me. For the first time in my life, I felt like a fully recognized, equally valued daughter, not just a supporting character in Brittany's carefully curated narrative. My contributions were acknowledged, my opinions were respected, and my presence was genuinely welcomed. This newfound sense of self-worth allowed me to rebuild my own financial stability, to pursue the personal goals I had put on hold during those years of extreme self-denial. I was finally able to trade up my cramped apartment for a place with natural light, a dishwasher, and a bedroom that could actually fit a queen-sized bed. I started contributing to a 401k, building a nest egg for the future, and I even began to dream, maybe, just maybe, about a future with Mike. A future that included a wedding, a house, and perhaps someday a family of my own. The biggest lesson I learned through this painful but ultimately transformative process was this: love should never require you to sacrifice your dignity. For years, I'd been conditioned to believe that providing financial support without seeking recognition was the ultimate act of selfless love. But I discovered that truly healthy relationships require mutual respect, open communication, and reciprocal appreciation. Standing up for yourself isn't selfish when you're asking for basic human dignity. Demanding equal treatment isn't unreasonable when you've been consistently overlooked, undervalued, and erased. Sometimes the people who love you need to temporarily lose your support to fully understand why they should value and appreciate you. The most crucial realization of all your worth as a human being isn't determined by what you're willing to give up for others. It's determined by how you honor and respect yourself in the process of loving them. True family love creates space for everyone to be seen valued and appreciated for their unique contributions, their individual strengths, and their very existence. Today, my relationship with my family is healthier, stronger, and more authentic than it has ever been. We've learned to communicate directly to express our needs openly and to avoid making assumptions or playing out old, ingrained patterns. We celebrate each other's successes with genuine enthusiasm, and we support each other's struggles without creating unfair burdens or fostering silent sacrifices. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever poured your heart and soul into caring for others and received nothing but silence in return, I want you to know that change is possible. It requires courage. It demands firm boundaries, and it almost always involves difficult, uncomfortable conversations. But the result, relationships built on mutual respect, genuine appreciation, and unconditional love, is worth fighting for. Now tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced similar family dynamics? How did you navigate the complexities of favoritism, expectation, and unspoken sacrifice? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in ways that felt deeply uncomfortable but ultimately necessary? Share your thoughts, your experiences, your wisdom. Let's create a community of support and understanding. And if this story resonated with you, if it sparked a flicker of recognition in your own life, then give that like button a tap. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories about family relationships and the transformative power of finding your voice. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by their willingness to be invisible. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it inspires you to value yourself as much as you value the people you love, because you deserve to be seen, you deserve to be appreciated, and you deserve to be treated with the same respect you give to others. Always remember that.